Spoilers ahead. Hannibal Lecter had every opportunity to disappear. Not once, multiple times, across every version of this story ever told. He had the intelligence, the resources, and the patience to be gone before anyone knew what they were looking for. A man of his means, his discipline, his careful attention to detail, vanishing would have been easy, practical, the obvious move. He didn't make it. And that single fact, more than the killings, more than the manipulation, more than any of the surface-level horror the stories dress him in, that one fact tells you exactly who Hannibal Lecter is, and exactly where every story about him quietly gets it wrong.
The popular read is that he's a predator. Brilliant, controlled, dangerous. A monster wearing a very expensive suit, moving through polite society with a private contempt for everyone around him. And that read isn't wrong. It's just shallow. Because predators optimize for survival above everything else. They avoid exposure. They don't maintain unnecessary contact with the people hunting them. They don't offer real, useful insight to investigators. They don't form lasting emotional bonds with the one person most likely to bring them down. They don't stay in the same city, the same social circles, the same conversations, when leaving would cost them nothing.
Hannibal stays. Every single time, across every adaptation, in every medium, he stays. And the stories tend to frame that as arrogance, as the classic villain flaw. He thinks he's untouchable. He gets careless. Hubris undoes him. It's a clean narrative explanation. It also doesn't hold up to even basic scrutiny, because Hannibal Lecter is not careless. Everything he does is deliberate. The meals are deliberate. The conversations are deliberate. The small cruelties and the larger kindnesses and the carefully chosen words, all deliberate. A man this controlled doesn't stay because he forgot to leave. He stays because staying is the point.
He isn't trying to get away. He is trying to be found.
Not by everyone. Not by institutions or law enforcement or anyone operating at the level of process and procedure. By one person. One specific kind of person. Someone with the capacity to look directly at what he is. Not the performance, not the cultural surface, not the charm, and not look away. That is the engine running underneath every decision Hannibal Lecter makes across his entire existence as a character. Not hunger, not some abstract love of violence, not even the aesthetic philosophy the stories use to make him feel like literature. A need, a very specific, very human need, to be completely known by someone who can survive the knowing.
This is uncomfortable to say plainly, which is part of why the stories tend to bury it under horror aesthetics. It's easier to watch a monster. A monster can be caged, profiled, understood at a safe distance. What's harder to watch is a person shaped by the particular loneliness of being exceptional in a world that can't perceive it, not in any real way, not at the level that matters. Hannibal Lecter is, at his core, profoundly isolated, and every act of violence, every careful manipulation, every extended game, all of it is oriented toward ending that isolation, just once, with just one person.
Here is what his actual psychology looks like when you remove the genre requirements.
He divides the world into two categories, and they are not predator and prey. That's a surface reading that the stories encourage because it sounds right. The actual division is between people who perceive and people who don't. The non-perceiving are not enemies to him. They're not prey in any emotional sense. They are closer to furniture. They occupy space. They make noise. They fail consistently to register as real in any way that touches him. When he removes them from the world, there is no anger in it, no satisfaction in the way there would be for someone acting out of rage or cruelty. It reads to him the way editing reads to a writer, cleaning up what doesn't belong. The perceiving are a completely different matter. There are very few of them, and he knows it. When he encounters someone who can follow a logic most people can't access, who can sit with uncomfortable truths without reaching for a simpler explanation, who demonstrates the capacity to see the world at a level that actually matches his own. Something activates in him that is entirely unlike how he operates with everyone else. He doesn't want to consume them. He wants proximity to them. He wants to be in conversation with them. He wants, more than anything, for that person to eventually see him completely and make a choice, not run, not report, not reduce him to a case file. Just see and stay.
Will Graham is the most complete version of this, and the Will Graham relationship is where the stories come closest to the real thing before pulling back toward genre comfort. Hannibal helps Will catch killers, not as cover, not as misdirection. He gives Will genuinely accurate insight that works, that leads somewhere real, that makes Will better at what he does. Think about what that means from a purely strategic standpoint. He is actively assisting the process that could lead to his own exposure. No one reads that as good strategy, because it isn't strategy at all. It's investment. He is investing in Will Graham the way someone invests in a relationship they believe has the potential to become something they've never had before. He is building towards a moment where Will knows everything and has to decide what to do with that knowledge. The question every adaptation frames as central, will Will catch Hannibal, is not the question Hannibal is asking. The question Hannibal is asking is far simpler and far more devastating. When Will finally sees all of it, when there's nothing left between them, no performance, no professional distance, no comfortable psychological framework, what does he do?
Does he stay?
That's not a thriller question. That's the oldest human question there is, and it lives at the center of everything Hannibal does, every choice he makes, every risk he takes that a purely rational predator would never take. Now here is where the stories make their error, because they need him contained. A free, satisfied Hannibal Lecter with no dramatic tension around him is just a man living well somewhere, beautiful, unreachable, and complete. That doesn't generate story. So the writers engineer his capture or exposure in ways designed to feel like consequences of his psychology, like his emotions finally cost him something, like caring about Will made him sloppy, like attachment introduced the flaw that brought him down. It's a satisfying structure. It gives the protagonist agency. It makes the audience feel like the right side won. But look at what Hannibal actually does in those critical moments. He doesn't lose control. He doesn't panic. He doesn't make the kind of errors that come from clouded judgment. What he does is remove obstacles to the relationship. He eliminates people who are positioned between him and Will. He creates circumstances that force honesty, that collapse the professional and personal distance and put them in the same space with the same information and no more room for pretending. That is not a man coming apart under emotional pressure. That is a man accelerating toward an outcome he has been building toward the entire time. The outcome is not escape. It is revelation. He has always wanted Will to know. Every action he has taken has been moving toward the moment where there is nothing left to hide. Getting caught is not the story failing him. Getting caught is the story finally arriving at the destination he selected at the beginning. The narrative calls this Will winning. Hannibal's psychology calls it completion. And that is the narrative error, not a minor one. Because if you accept that Hannibal's capture is a form of success rather than failure, if you follow that logic all the way through without flinching, then the ending every major version of this story gives you becomes dishonest. Will doesn't defeat Hannibal, he fulfills him. And the emotional weight of those two things is entirely different. One is a triumph. The other is something much quieter and much harder to shake. So what does the honest ending look like?
Hannibal's defining need is to be completely known by someone capable of understanding him. That has driven everything. Once that moment arrives, once Will sees all of it and doesn't collapse into denial or procedure, Hannibal has reached the end of the only goal he has ever genuinely had. The theater is over. The performance is done. There is nothing left to prove. no remaining distance to close, no next step in a game that has already ended.
The consistent move, the one that follows from every decision he has made across the entire arc, is not a confrontation. It's not a dramatic final act. It's not surrender in any meaningful sense, and it's not escape in the way action storytelling uses that word.
He disappears.
Not in fear, not in desperation, in completion. The way someone leaves a conversation that has finally said everything it needed to say. He has been seen, fully, finally, by the right person. There is nothing left here for him, so he goes.
But he leaves something behind. Not a threat, not a taunt, not the kind of message designed to maintain power or keep the game alive. Something closer to an acknowledgement. A single communication that says, "You saw me. That was the only thing I ever needed from you. I have it now. Goodbye."
And then he is genuinely gone, not hiding, not circling, not waiting to be found again. Gone in the way that only becomes possible when someone has gotten what they came for and has no remaining reason to stay.
What that leaves behind is Will Graham. No capture, no closure, no clean professional ending where the monster is behind glass and the world is sorted back into order. Just a man who looked at something the rest of the world would call evil, was fully understood by it in return, and then watched it choose to leave. Not because it had to, because it wanted to, because it was finished.
That is the psychologically honest ending. Not triumphant, not tragic in any operatic sense. Just the specific, lasting weight of being known by something you cannot fully categorize, and having that be the last word. A silence where the most intense connection of your life used to be, and the knowledge that it ended not because you won, but because it was complete. Every choice Hannibal Lecter makes across every version of this story points to that ending. He was never the monster at the edge of the frame. He was a person running a single, long, patient experiment, trying to find out if being fully known was possible. The stories give him a cage because the genre requires one. His psychology would have given him something the audience can't watch through safety glass. An ordinary evening, in an ordinary city, at a table set for one. Invisible. Finished. Finally at rest.
The cage is the story's answer. The disappearance is his. If this is the kind of analysis you keep coming back for, where the character's logic leads and the story's convenience follows, this channel runs on exactly that. Subscribe, and the next one is already here.